Begin with our prayer today, Psalm 138. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I thank you, Lord, with all my heart. In the presence of the angel, to you I sing. I bow low towards your holy temple. I praise your name for your mercy and faithfulness. For you have exalted over all your name and your promise. On the day I cried out, you answered. You strengthened my spirit. All the kings of the earth will praise you, Lord, when they hear the words of your mouth. They will sing of the ways of the Lord. How great is the glory of the Lord. The Lord is on high, but cares for the lowly, and knows the proud from afar. Though I walk in the midst of dangers, you guard my life when my enemies rage. You stretch out your hand, your right hand saves me. The Lord is with me to the end. Lord, your mercy endures forever. Never forsake the work of your hands. Almighty God, we ask you to bless us as we start the book of Ruth. Allow us to open our hearts to your presence in our lives, that we'll always see your mercy through Christ our Lord. Amen. So, how did you like the book of Ruth? Nice change, huh? After Joshua and Judges, kind of a nice change of the mood. Well, yeah, that's Bible. We know that we do. So let's say first few words on Ruth, and then we'll continue. And again, we will finish today, because we should be able to do that within an hour and some. So we have plenty of time. So the book of Ruth is the only book in the Bible that is being named, actually one of two, that is being named after someone who is not Jewish. Because Ruth is not Jewish, she's a Moabite. And the other book that is named after someone who is not Jewish is the book of Judith. Job. But actually, Job is not Jewish, actually. Yeah, but still. Although rabbis will claim him because they said, no, he was the righteous man, he has to be Jewish. But okay, so what's happened in the book of Ruth? Basically, the book of Ruth it's a story of friendship. It's a story of a very friendship which is very different than, because it's friendship which is not based on pleasure or utility, but mainly on virtue of faithfulness and admiration, put it that way, affection. Because when you look at the book of Ruth, we see that the goodwill of Naomi and Ruth towards each other and their friendship is something that is being expressed in the term of what the Hebrew call hesed. Hesed, which is loyal mercy or faithfulness of God, is usually used for God. But God is the one who is hesed, who is loyal and faithful to his people. In book of Ruth, the term hesed is used on relationship between Ruth and Naomi. So that's why it's a tale, a story which is kind of very convenient. Why? Because when you look at the names, they are all very symbolic. But is this book historical? Well, it has to be, because Ruth is great-grandmother of King David. So the scholar said it was probably written during the reign of King David as an apology to explain why King David, who was partially not Jewish, how he can become king of the Jews. Because remember, Moabites were mortal enemies of the Jews. And when you remember the book of Deuteronomy, it was the only one nation that was told, that the Jews were told, never to intermarry with them. And if they intermarry with the Jewish people, their children will never be able to become Jewish, even if its mother was Jewish and so on. So Moabites were a no people. And yet, King David, again, who was the beloved of God, somehow has to explain why he could be the king of the Jews, why he is qualified to be. So they came up probably with this story. Is this historical? We don't know, but there's a lot of things there that has to be, let's say, historically accurate. Because remember, this is only 2 generations removed from King David. 2 generations is not really that much. So people will still remember, especially in the Middle East, especially in that area where they trace the genealogy, 20, 30 generations back. So they will know that there was something going on. So that's probably what was done. It was written during the reign of King David. Also, I think to show why King David was the one who was chosen by God to establish the new dynasty in Israel. because of the virtue of his great-grandmother. Okay? So that's one possibility. So what do we have here? What is important in this book? The word return, to return, is repeated in these 4 chapters 14 times. And out of these 14 times, 12 times in the first chapter. So it's all about return, return, return. Okay? What is the return about? Return to life, return to the ways of God, return to the right relationship between people. But also could be, because that book could have been put in this place in the Bible right after the book of Joshua, of Judges, to remind again, remember, book of Judges and Joshua, remember, they were written for people who were in exile, mostly, during the time of exile. Actually, they were finished during the time of exile. So if you are in exile, and they talk about return all the time, so okay, so if I will be, let's say, following the example of Ruth and Naomi, we will also return to our country, to life, and to God. So that's possibility. But it was known before that time, so we know that book is earlier. It was just, let's say, redacted in a way that fitted within the theology of the exile. Okay? So what we have here then, so again, if you notice in that book, God is almost not present. God is like in the shadow. He's mentioned a couple of times and so on, but he's not there. Which is also good because it shows, again, this is Bible. So what do they show? That God does not have to be explicitly present to someone. The way people live their lives, that's what makes God's presence. That's what makes him present in our midst, the way we live our lives. Because we're the ones who are supposed to be living the attributes of God in our daily lives. So Book of Ruth is a perfect example of that. That's why we have this word hesed being repeated. This loyal faithfulness, this loyal mercy is repeated over and over again, several times. So let's talk about the 2 main protagonists in this book. So there's 3, but Boaz will come in later. We're going to talk about Boaz later. Ruth and Naomi, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. They are very special because Ruth has a great capacity for devotion and love. She's an example of that, extreme example of that. But Naomi is also someone who proves herself to be worthy of that devotion and love. And she also responds in kind because she's very concerned about her daughters-in-law as well. Both daughters-in-law, the one who left her and the one who stayed with her. So you have 2 protagonists who are very, let's say, like examples of steadfastness, devotion, and care for each other. Again, that's why you have this friendship, which is basically friendship of souls. It's not just friendship based on knowledge and things like that. It goes much deeper. It's like 2 friendly souls that click together. Okay? And again, I think that would be it when it comes to introduction, because everything else is in the text. So let's go to the text. So in the days, chapter 1, when the judges ruled, so we know it's a time of the judges, so we still in what we were doing last week. There was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem and Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was bereft of her 2 sons and her husband. So as you see, Elimelech and his wife Naomi and 2 sons, they're running away from famine in the land because they don't want to die. What's happening? They go to the country of Moab, of their enemies, and what happened there? They all die there. So there is no escape from that. What is interesting here is the names. They're very symbolic. Elimelech means, my God is king. Naomi means pleasant. Pleasant, or what is the other one? Or my delight, could be also my delight. So Naomi will be my delight or pleasant. And actually she lives up to her name. Then their sons, the names of them, Chilon was... Oh, I got lost in my notes again. Chilion, okay. I'm going to find it later on. But when you look at the names of the daughters-in-law, so Orpha means back of the neck. Back of the neck. Why? Well, she was the one who showed her mother-in-law back of her neck. She went back to her family. And Ruth basically could mean probably the best translation would be friendship. Ruth means friendship. Could also mean refreshment, but that's not really the main matter. But so you see, those names are very, let's say, symbolic, put it that way, and that's what they play. So they're running from death, and they meet death. Also, Boaz, named later on, the name Boaz means in him is strength, or he is strong. Boaz is strong man. So what we have here, the guys die, and there is a problem. So once they die, verse 6, then she started with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord has visited, or the Lord has remembered his people and has given them food. So now when Naomi lost everything, because remember, this is patriarchal society. If you don't have husband, son, or father to take care of you as a woman, you basically have no means of surviving, because you don't have anything. So, but Naomi decides to go back to her native place. Why? Because later on we will learn that she still owns a piece of land over in Bethlehem. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they were on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi says to her two daughters-in-law, now you see Naomi's concern for the well-being of her daughters-in-law. Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find a home, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back my daughters. She uses the word my daughters. Not my daughters-in-law, which is a very different word in Hebrew, but she uses the word my daughters. So she's either very close to them or very concerned about them. Maybe both. Why you will go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that I may become your husbands? Turn back my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughter, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake, again the concern, that the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. So they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. The word clinging is very strong. Remember, in Gospel of John, Jesus tells to Mary Magdalene, do not cling to me. So this is a very strong attachment. And the word cling will also appear later on a few times in the book of Ruth, describing in a way of following someone or being protected also by someone to whom you attach yourself. Just to explain what's going on in here. Usually, again, you have looked at that. Both brothers lived with their wives for 10 years, no children. So you just wonder what was going on. Well, what was going on, basically, God did not bless them with children. They decided to leave the land of Israel and live in the foreign land. So they decided to abandon the blessing of God, so God will not bless them with children. Later on, that curse or lack of blessing will be reversed by faithfulness of Ruth. We'll see that later in the book. What they call here about what Naomi is talking about, sons who will take them as wives and so on. We're talking about the Levirate marriage. We talk about that in book of Deuteronomy. Levirate marriage is when, let's say, there's a family and the oldest brother dies without having children. The next one in line, brother, has to marry the widow, and the child that will be born from that union will inherit and be the child of that brother who died, not the one who, not the one who made him. So that's the thing. If you remember in book of Genesis, the story of Judah and Tamar and his three sons. Judah gives Tamar to his first son. he doesn't have children, he died. Second, whose name was Onan, doesn't want to have children for his brother because he is not generous. He wants to keep inheritance to himself. Because remember, the firstborn receives 2/3 of the inheritance. So if he dies without children, guess what? Everything goes to the second one. Okay? So Onan is very selfish. God punishes him, he dies without having children. The third one is too young, so Judah sends Tamar to her father, saying, I will call you when my son grows up. Guess what? He forgot her number, never calls, right? So she has to dress as a prostitute and come back and seduce her father-in-law so that he gives her children. Okay, so that's the story, that's levirate marriage. Also, when there will be, for example, there will be one brother, and he will die, and he has only sisters, then the first cousin, who is male, will have to step in and play the role also called Goel, which means the one who redeems, the redeemer. Goel is someone who pays you debt from the family, who steps up and performs the levirate marriage and so on and so forth. We'll see that later on in this book. Boaz and another man will be this Goel, the ones who will have to step up and take Ruth as a wife to have a child for the man who has died, so that his name could be alive and also that they inherit the land. So she's telling her, you see, I'm too old, I cannot have children, and even if I had a child, I'm going to wait 20 years before he grows up, and so she's concerned about them, and she sends them to their homes. So Orpha leaves. But then verse 15, Naomi said to Ruth, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return or go back after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, now this is probably one of the best known passages from the Bible. Entreat me not to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. You people shall be my people. And you, God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more, also if even death parts me from you. You certainly heard that passage before many, many times. My people will be, you people will be my people, and so on. So, Book of Ruth. So what is Ruth expressing? She's expressing this, let's say, link to Naomi. And the scholars are always, and the rabbis, they were asking themselves, why Ruth was so attached to Naomi. Was it the love for her husband? Could be. Was it, let's say, the only link that she will have to her dead husband? Because once she leaves, there is nothing left of her dead husband for her. So Naomi was on the connection. Maybe that's what it was. Was it charity? Could be, she's an older woman, mother-in-law. She probably was very caring and so on. They clicked in and they fit in together well. So maybe that's what she decided. But we don't know. Maybe all of the above. But there is something in Ruth that again is expressed by this word hesed, which is loyalty, loving loyalty. And that's a word that it's expressed in relationship of Ruth to Naomi and vice versa. So what's happened there? She uses the word you in this short line, this one verse, 2 verses, 6 times. So she's talking about Naomi, but you. She doesn't talk about herself. It's all about Naomi. She does everything for her. So again, it's like this whole the idea of friendship and connection. Now, verse 18 is interesting. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. And then so 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. So you can imagine, from the time that they started walking till they get to Bethlehem, a couple of days, Naomi didn't say a word. Total silence. Why? She thinks she still can discourage Ruth from following her by not talking to her. Because she doesn't have any more words to share with her or to discourage her. So she just gives her quiet days. Till they get to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. Bethlehem, even today, is a small town. At the time of Jesus, the population of Bethlehem was probably around a couple hundred people. So probably time of Naomi and Ruth, you can say that the town is very, very small. Everybody is in everybody else's business. They know what you have for dinner and everything else. And, if you have 100, 200 people live in the same town, everybody knows everybody. So they all stirred because of her. There is a rumor, there's something's going on. The 4 of them went out, only 1 came back, and she has some stranger with her. What's wrong with that woman? So they said, is this Naomi? And she said to them, do not call me Naomi. Again, do not call me delightful. Do not call me pleasant. But call me Mara, bitter. Mara means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full of life, was looking for life, but the Lord has brought me back empty. There is nothing left. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has afflicted me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. What is here? Everybody is, let's say, curious and stirred because they don't know what's going on. Everybody is gossiping, but there is nothing, there is no help to be offered to Naomi and Ruth. There's absolutely nothing there. So they receive her, they just watch. Okay, she came back to her old house after 15 years, maybe so on. Let's see what's going to happen. So now, chapter 2, the plot thickens, as we say. Now, Naomi has a kinsman of her husband, a man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Again, Boaz in Hebrew is my strength. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. Again, she calls her daughter. But when you look at that, they mention Boaz as a kinsman of her husband to show us that Boaz is very passive at this moment. He does nothing. He knows they are back. He knows Naomi is back. He is related to Naomi, which means he's supposed to be the goer. He's supposed to marry Naomi so that the name of Elimelech can be alive, so that she can have children. Boaz does nothing at the moment. Okay? And in the Bible, whatever is not said is also very important. Whatever is not done, not said is very important. So Boaz is actually all the way to chapter 3, he's very passive. He has his moments, but he's not really someone who shows too much initiative. Well, maybe he didn't want to get into this role of Goel, marrying Naomi or someone else and so on. Maybe he just was fed up with that. So she set forth, verse 3, and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. Remember, this is the custom, again, going back to book of Deuteronomy, that Moses told the Israelites that if you reap the field, don't pick up every single grain and every single ear of corn. Leave it for the poor and the widow and the strangers. So that was the custom. So what happened in the book of Deuteronomy will tell us that there is such a thing like charity in Israelis, which means we leave things for the poor. We don't hand them over to them. Why? Because whatever is left in the field, they have to go and pick them up themselves. Okay? So nobody will pick it up and give it to them. No. You want to eat, you go and you work for your food. Which I think is a pretty good approach to charity nowadays. Because very often we enable people by handing over things to them. Sometimes it's necessary, but most of the time, again, that's the worst thing we can do to diminish someone's dignity. To hand over something to them. Because there's nothing, even poor people, they need some dignity, that they need to do something for to earn their food, to earn their living. Because that gives them dignity and sense of living. If everything is just given to you, yes.
So you were mentioning for women in those days that were widows and they didn't have a father and they didn't have sons. They were basically destitute. Were you saying for them to survive they would have to go to the fields and gather their food that way?
To fields, to vineyards, to whatever, pick up leftovers.
And where did they live?
Good question. Sometimes they would be allowed to live in their houses when they live with their husbands. Unless there was a situation like you see that in the Bible, a couple of places, that family would a house because it was a nice house, they would kick her out. And if she has nobody to defend her, she's on the street. Yeah. There's no social security, there's nothing there.
And so literally a small town like Bethlehem of 200 people, they would allow people to.
Yeah, see, Bethlehem it's a dirt poor town, especially in the times of Ruth and later and even the time of Jesus. Because most of the houses from that time were just caves. caves in the... Why? Because first of all, it was nice and cool inside. But what they did, they just put a wall or kind of rack in front of the cave, entrance to a cave, but they would be living in cave. So is one cave better than another? Maybe. Maybe it's bigger, more, I don't know, whatever it is. But it's a dirt poor town. Yeah, nothing special about Bethlehem. If you go to Holy Land, I went to a couple of those places, being the shepherd's field, and they would look at the caves. That's how they would live. Just a cave that people will live in, with their animals, probably as well, during the winter time. So it was nice and warm, Smell doesn't really matter. So they were allowed to glean, they were allowed to pick up the grain and so on, and that's how they survived. So now, verse 3. So she sent forth and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And now this is the good one. And she happened to, it's a pure coincidence, right? She happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz happens to come from Bethlehem. So she comes in and happens to, to get to his place. And as she goes there, it happens that he comes by. Pure coincidence, okay? Or God is in the shadow. Or God is guiding. So we don't know. Okay? Sometimes, coincidences are God's way of telling us which way to go. And behold, okay, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you, Shalom Aleichem. And they said, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose maiden is this? So he sees that woman. And guess what? As I told you, Bethlehem is a small town. He knows exactly who she is. If you have, 200 people living in the town, if the new face shows up, you know who they is. There is something going on. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, it is the Moabite maiden who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came and she was continued from early morning until now without resting even for a moment. So Ruth is very dedicated. And, the servant is saying, look, she was working hard from the very morning. She didn't stop even till now for nothing. So now we see that Boaz is getting a little touched by that. So he says to Ruth, now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but your translation have keep close. The word is supposed to be translated cling to. So stay very close. Attach yourself to my maidens, to the girls that were picking up the grain. Let your eyes be upon the field which they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to molest you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessel and drink what the young men have drowned. You see her. Let's say, what do you say here? One of the rabbis who said that the grace brings graciousness. The grace of Ruth, of the total dedication, brings graciousness in Boaz, who goes out of his way to be gracious to her. So he did nothing for them when they came to Bethlehem. He remained silent. But when he sees her working, he's touched by that. Okay? He's being changed by it. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her that he's risen now. He explains himself. All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me. So he cannot play ignorant. He knows exactly what's happening. Yet still he did play ignorant. And how you left your father and mother in their native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord recompense for you what you have done, and a full reward will be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Remember, going back to the book of Exodus, under your wings I find refuge, my Lord. So Boaz is explaining himself, and he's also telling Ruth that because of her hesed, of her loyalty, God of Israel, whom she did not know, he took her under his wings. Then she said, you are most gracious to me, my Lord, for you have touched my heart. Translation has comforted me. The Hebrew has, you have touched my heart. And spoken kindly to you, my servant, though I am not one of you, maid servant. So Ruth again, she recognized and she is grateful for what he says, what he does for her. At the meantime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her parched grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed the young man, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it to her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So, touched by Ruth's example, in a way here, Boaz becomes very generous as well. Because he goes out of his way to help her and Naomi at this moment. Now he delivers the reward for Ruth's faithfulness. Because what's the reward? She can have whatever she wants. And that's kind of, again, the whole example of how people are being touched by generosity are generous in kind as well. They're generous as well. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, bless you, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took, how much is ephah? Ephah is bushel of grain. That's a good amount of grain that she got. So she was going back home with a big sack of grain. So they won't be hungry. So she took it up and went into the city. She showed her mother-in-law what she had gleaned, and she also brought out and gave her that food that she had left over after being satisfied. So see how dedicated she is. She not only brings the grain, but also what she has eaten for lunch, leftovers from her lunch. So she shared everything with her mother-in-law. And her mother-in-law said to her, now Naomi is getting a little suspicious here. All of a sudden, where that coming? Doesn't work like that. Something is not right here. Where did you glean today? Or where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. So she knew what was happening. She knew that someone looked at Ruth and said, okay, nice girl. Okay? And so she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, the name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be the Lord, Barak Adonai, whose kindness, or whose, again, hesed, loving mercy, kindness, has not forsaken the living or the dead. So whom God has not forsaken? Her husband, her sons, her daughter-in-law. God has mercy. God is faithful to them. And now, Naomi reveals to Ruth what is the main thing in this book. So she said to her, the man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin. Again, Goel. She used the word Goel. Goel, the Redeemer, someone who's supposed to redeem us. And Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close to my servants till they have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is well, my daughter. Then you go out with these maidens, lest in other fields you will be molested. So Naomi knows that Boaz has an eye for Ruth. Why? Well, she comes back with all that grain and food, and she said, he told her to come back. Naomi is not stupid. Okay? So she tells Ruth, go on. And she said again, so she kept close to the maidens of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest. And she lived with her mother-in-law. So we see the things are progressing, but Boaz still fails to make a move. She's the girl, she's supposed to do his job. She fails to do that. So what's happening? Naomi has to take initiative. Okay? Chapter 3. It's a great chapter, actually. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, again, this whole idea, daughter, my bin, should I not seek a home for you, that it may be well with you? Now, is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maiden you were? So he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. You know what threshing floor is, right? what they do, there is a part of the field that they will put together grain and chaff, and they will have like a big piece of cloth, I think, on a frame, and they will put some grain and chaff on it, and they will throw it into the air. Chaff will be blown away, the grain will fall on that piece of cloth. That's the winnowing. That's what they will do at that time. Back-breaking job. I seen it once with my great-grandmother was doing that when I was 7. I was trying to do that. Forget it. I'm not a country boy. I'm a city boy. Small town boy, actually. So she's telling her what is happening after the harvest is done and the grain is separated from chaff. Then there is a party. Why? Because the harvest is finished. The harvest is finished. We have enough food for another year. Let's have some fun. Okay? So she said to her, wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. So make yourself presentable and go over there to the party. But she said, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Very smart woman. She knows how to do things, okay? But then she said, but when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go, uncover his feet and lay down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. Okay, what she is telling her. When he has a couple of drinks and goes to sleep, go and sleep with him. Uncover his feet. Remember, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, feet is a euphemism for male sexual organ. That's why when later on David would have little Cushamite who was brought about to warm his feet. No, she wasn't brought to warm his feet. Okay? They brought him one young body to help him to see how alive he is. And it didn't work because David was dead as they got. But again, every time you read that in the Old Testament, feet is a euphemism for male organ. So what she's going to do? Well, she's going to sneak it under his cloak. That's what she's going to do. Okay? So verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law has told her. And then when Boaz has eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry. So he has more than a couple of drinks, okay? He was merry. He went to lay down at the end of the heap of grain, and then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And now this verse is best. At midnight he wakes up, and he sees this young woman next to him, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And turned over and behold, a woman like his senior, and said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Spread your garment over your maidservant, for you are next of kin. She reminds him that he is Goel, that his duty to do that. So the woman reminds the man about his duty. Like Tamar reminded Judah that was his duty to procure the son for his son. Ruth takes over initiative and tells him, this is your duty, to make the son, to take care of me. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. So Boaz is touched. Why? Because he is probably a little older than her, and she comes, to him, not to some young man. So he's kind of like, ooh, okay. Not everything is that bad with me, right? There is still some hope. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of word. So they all know what she's worth of. That she's a hard worker, that she's faithful. They all know. What is the problem? She's not Jewish. Why is that the problem? Remember, you are Jewish when you're born of a Jewish mother. So there will be a problem here. But Naomi will find a solution to that problem later on. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will do the part of the next of kin of you. Okay, no, sorry. Okay, verse 12. And now it is true that I am a near kinsman, yet there is another kinsman nearer than I. So he's a honorable man, because he could just use her, but he says, no, wait. There's another guy who has more right than I do. Okay? What is interesting, that guy from this moment on, he is never named. Boaz has a name. The other guy who refused Ruth and refused to play Goel, he has no name. It's like, if Bible doesn't name someone, it's a statement as well. Remember the Pharaoh? Pharaoh doesn't have a name. The midwives, everybody else has a name in the book of Exodus and other things. Pharaoh is just a king. A king is a king. Here, the other man is not even named later on. So if he do the part, I will let him do it. But if he is not willing to do part of the next of kin to you, again, the Goel, then as Lord lives, I will do the part of the Goel for you. Lay down until the morning. So they stay together, they just stay together. What they were doing, we don't know. So she lay at his feet until the morning. All right, so you can think about that. But again, Boaz he shows himself an honorable man. So they still sleep together. They might probably not have sex. But they still, and she's still at his feet, right? But she arose before one could recognize another. So again, she leaves him when it's still a little dark, before the dawn. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. So he wants to protect her reputation as well. He doesn't want her to be, being fingers and gossip, pointing fingers at and gossiping about that. Here she goes, first party, and she goes and have some sex with someone. So she yelled in, bring the mantle you are wearing and hold it out. So she yelled the mantle, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and laid it upon her. And she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, and this is a gift of gratitude. Gratitude. And she said, and Naomi said, how did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man has done to her, saying, this 6 measures of barley he gave for me. And he said, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. Naomi knows her family, put it that way. Boaz was very passive. All of a sudden he had a little taste of the honey, and from this moment on he takes the initiative. He's very active from this moment on. So verse 4, right in the morning, Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. Why the gate? Remember, the gate is the place, gate to the city, where the elders gathered when people are coming for judgment and for resolve the problems. Because gate is a nice and shady place, you can sit in the shade, you don't have to sit in the sun. And everybody has to pass, going in and out of town, so the elders have the latest gossip and visitors, and they see everything and everybody, so they're kind of in charge of the business. So Boaz goes to the gate, and behold, the man comes in, and Boaz said, turn aside, friend, and sit down here. And he turned and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. 10 men, kahal, that's the number that the Jewish people need to say the prayer as a community. It's always 10 men. Yeah. So here we have 10 judges that are coming to hear the case. So then he said to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land which belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. She's not selling it, but he has to sell it somehow. Ruth and Naomi didn't say anything about selling that land. But Boaz is presenting his case. He's a smart man, okay? That's why he is rich. And then, so I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. Again, if you are Goel, be Goel. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one beside you to redeem it, and I come after you. And now it's interesting because Boaz says to the man, there is a piece of land to redeem it, to buy it, and so on. He says, oh yeah, I'm gonna go for it. And Boaz says, by the way, there is a woman attached to that. Okay? And the whole thing's change. And the Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also buying Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to restore the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the next of kin said, I cannot redeem it myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. He is stingy. Why? Because he knows, if he buys the field, Naomi has a child, that child will be the one who will inherit that field, not the one who bought it. Land goes back to the child, that will be born from Naomi and his union. So about his other children and so on, he's losing. So guy is stingy. He's not generous. Why? When he's not generous, that's why he will lose the whole thing. So he says, take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Again, he's not willing to redeem it. So now,
is the fact that she is not Jewish also unattractive?
Well, it could be, but more is about the inheritance, because remember, Goel's role was to redeem the field because it has to stay in the family. Because Naomi and Ruth were related. She was daughter-in-law and daughter to... So if he had sex with her, the child that will be born will be still a child of her husband. Why? Because he is Goel, he does the duty for the husband. He is substitute. But the child will be the child of her husband, first husband, and he will inherit it, so the whole field will have to go back to that child. He doesn't want to do it. Okay? He's cheap. So now there is a custom in the former times of Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and that was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, buy it to yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all of the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilon and to Machlon. Also Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Machlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. See, Boaz is generous. Okay? He wants to do that for that dead man, for that family. That the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his native place, you are witnesses this day. And they all said, yes, we are witnesses, and so on and so forth. This custom of a sandal, if you remember book of Deuteronomy, it was the one instance in the law of Israel, that the woman could could bring men to the court if he was a Goel and he refused to give child to his brother or to his cousin. So she would bring him before the judges. She would ask the question, will you give a child to your brother? If he says no, she would take the sandal off his feet, slap him in the face and spit in his face. That's book of Deuteronomy. Here is another version of it. Here is the man hand over his sandal saying, I won't be doing, now it's yours. Gospel of John in New Testament. John sees Jesus. What does he say? I'm not worthy to take the sandal. I'm not worthy. That's what they're referring here to. I'm not worthy to untie and to take the sandals. Why? Because Jesus is the groom, not John. So John said, I'm not the groom. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not worthy to be the bridegroom of Israel. He is. See, that's the connection in the Gospel of John to this passage. But Jesus is the one who is the groom. He is the one who is coming to marry the widow, Israel. Okay? Going to matrimonial symbol in John that we just went through. Yes?
Boaz, to clarify, so he has not been married before, he doesn't have any prior children?
The rabbis will say that he was, that's why he was elder. That's why he's her daughter, but he was cousin to Naomi's husband, so he has to be a little older. That's why he says, oh, you blessed because you didn't got a young man, you come to me. So the rabbis will say that he was married before, and the reason, and rabbis try to make explanation for everything. The reason why Boaz was not active from the beginning, it was because he just lost his wife. Nice explanation, okay? But the thing is, they said he was a widower. With children or without children, doesn't say. They don't know.
His children, though, from the first wife would not have received the inheritance.
No, they will receive his inheritance, but not Naomi's.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Just one clarification.
So whatever money he spent to buy the things from Naomi, it goes back to her.
And even if he's married, he still has to perform his duty to Ruth.
Yeah.
As he grows up.
Remember, only the first child that is bears the name of the father. And the other children they have are his. Okay, they are his children and his name. The only problem still here is Ruth is not Jewish. Let's see how the solution of that be. So you are the witnesses, and so on. And they said, build your house, may you prosper in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Again, they refer to Judah and Tamar, and son that was born from that union, which is almost exactly what's happening here. Now, the woman cheats him in order to procure child for her dead husband. So Ruth is being compared here to Tamar. It's pretty interesting because they all end up in genealogy of Jesus later on, and King David. Very irregular unions, put it that way. So, because the children of that Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz and Ruth took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord, and he knew her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. For 10 years, she didn't have a son, children. First time they get together, she gets pregnant. God restores fruitfulness. She's no longer barren. So God restores blessings of His. And the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may His name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. So now, people who were treating Ruth, who didn't even look at her, who treated her with contempt, all of a sudden, she is the greatest blessing that could happen. See, this reverse of the whole attitude of people. Then Naomi, this is important, then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. And then the woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. Blessing is restored. What is that? The ancient custom of adoption. If you remember Abraham, Sarah, and their slave, right? Yes, what's happening there? Sarah gives her slave to Abraham. She bears a son. What Sarah does? She sits on a birthing stool, which is, again, in those times the women were giving birth crouching on a birthing stool, not laying down. Okay? They were crouching. So you can browse that because there are I saw several ones from Holy Land that they will have explained how this happens. So the women, there will be like a stool, women will kneel on that, let's say, whoever was delivering baby will be just kneeling under and catching the baby as a woman will give birth. So Naomi goes on that birthing stool, and they pass the child between her legs, and she takes the child and places it on her bosom. She's adopting the child as her own. Why is that important? Because Ruth is not Jewish. Naomi is. So the child, again, this is apology for King David. Why he's supposed to be king of the Jewish people? Because he is Jewish. His grandmother was Jewish. Okay? He was adopted, brought into the chosen people by his grandmother. So that's the whole idea. That's why they put it here. That's why it's so important. That's why they said God restores blessing to Naomi. Naomi's child is born. See, this whole idea how they play it. So Ruth will be happy with Boaz for the rest of their lives. It's always a happy end. But Naomi is happy because she has a son who is alive. And he's not only alive, as we see, because they named him Obed, blessing restored, which means blessing restored. And he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So this is the blessing that is restored. That is not only life is being brought back, it's not only a child, but it will be a child from whose family the first king of the king of Israel and the dynasty of kings of Israel will proceed, will come forward. So that's how God is blessing. Why is that important here? Because of Ruth's hesed, of Ruth's fidelity and loyalty. So God recognizes loyalty and fidelity of a human being towards each other, and because of our fidelity and loyalty and generosity, God blesses all the generations, and God blesses the people.
And Obed means blessing restored, is what you said?
Obed actually means one who serves. But sometimes it also could be translated as a restored blessing, something like that. The Hebrew is, remember, there is no vowels in it, so you're just consonants. It depends what kind of vowels you put in. You can come up with different translations. What counts always in Hebrew is the root of the verb. And sometimes it's, you can translate it many different ways. Usually from the context, but over here could be, yeah. So, and now these are descendants of Perez. Perez was father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Aminabda, Aminabda of Henson, Henson of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, and Jesse of David. So you see, the author goes back again to Perez. Perez, who was a child born to Tamar and Judah. So they connect those two stories. That's the women who are instrumental in the history of salvation here. So that's why this book is so beautiful, and so not only as a tale of friendship, but also to show that the Jewish people, as patriarchal as the society was, they still recognize that the history of salvation was, you put it nicely, helped by the, let's say, by the women who were smart enough to help it to be accomplished. Or the other side, by women who knew how to manipulate men in order for things to happen. Could be both ways. But the thing is, that's what it is. That's why you have Tamar, who is very, very, let's say, sleeping with her father-in-law in order to have child for her husband, who is dead. And Ruth, who goes out, and Naomi out of their way to assure that their dead husband and son will have someone who will carry the name. Because women are very, let's say, proactive in those things. But also very unusual in the history of salvation. That's why later on, you see, when we look at genealogy of Jesus, we see that there are 4 women in genealogy of Jesus. Actually 5. Mary is the 5th one. The first one is Rahab, the prostitute that lets people. Well, the first one is Tamar. Then we have Rahab, the prostitute, who lets the spies into Jericho. The third one is Ruth. And the fourth one is Bathsheba, the one who betrayed her husband, slept with David, and her son is Solomon, and so on. Those are 4 women that are in the line of Jesus, so very irregular, things like that. But yet, because King David also comes from this line. So basically what the evangelist is saying, like King David, God, like in the history and life of King David and his forefathers and foremothers, God is working not with people who are perfect, but with people who are loving. Loving. Generous. Not perfect. I think that's something to keep in mind, because very often we think we need to be perfect, right? Do things perfectly, be in the church, do all the things, keep all the commandments, things like that. We forgot that it's about love of God and our neighbor and generosity. That's what the hesed is. Loyalty and generosity. That's what it is. Because if you're loyal, you have to be generous. Why? Because when you're loyal to someone, meaning you have to give all of yourself to that person. That's loyalty, isn't it? Yeah. So it's loving kindness, loyal mercy, loyalty, generosity, all of the above. This is how God loves us. We as humans, we can live that way if we want to. It's not easy, as we see an example of Ruth, but it's possible. So we're done with the book of Ruth. It's a beautiful book. That's why I want to do it, because I think it's one class, little over 1 hour. We did it in 1 hour, as I told you, it's at least 1 hour. But it's worth it because it gives a little different twist on the history of salvation. Because, like Joshua judges all the other things, you always wars and fighting and everything else. All of a sudden you have friendship, loving kindness, generosity, and the prophets later on, they picked up exactly on that. Because Hesed, God loving kindness, and the way we treat each other, the prophets will be later on just talking about that over and over and over again. Because they said, that's what we own God, that's what we own each other. Nothing else, nothing more. Just this loving kindness, loyalty and generosity. Yes?
Did the people accept the baby as Naomi?
Yeah, they said this is
Because she adopted it, or they actually think she gave birth?
That's the custom. Once she goes through that custom, she puts her adopted, there's no question. Unlike society today, that the children will say, oh, what's my biological father, what is this, what is that? No. She's your mother, that's it. There's no questioning or discussing things. And that's the culture. So see, but there's a wisdom in that because where the kid grows with her. The only person that she knows that was the mother. Why would you then go and look for someone who never cared about you or someone who was not part of your life, or like in Ruth, it was a different case, but see, this whole idea, this is how it's supposed to be. See? Okay, you come into family, you become child of this family, and you're in. Look at Christian and Jewish, what's happening? We are the adopted children. That's exactly what's happening there. Church is adopting us. Jesus, God is adopting us in the church. So we basically, being born from the church, we become adopted children of God. We are on the same status as the Jewish people. No less, no more, exactly the same.
So this baby actually went through that circumcision, like...
Oh yeah. He's Jewish. There's no mother. He was raised as Jewish. He's a son of Naomi. That's it. Yeah. Well, see, there is a lot of wisdom in that when you look at it. A lot of wisdom. Yeah.
You're talking about loyalty and how David was loyal, but in reality there were some instances where, for example, he sent his friend to the front line.
He wasn't his friend. He was the husband of his lover.
Exactly.
No.
Being too loyal to his.
I thought that's why I go back to this. David was not perfect,
Right.
but he was very loyal. He was always loyal to God. David never points finger at others.
Loyal to God, and that's through him.
Not to humans too much. Maybe no. He was very loyal to Saul. He never lifted his finger against Saul. He was very respectful. But once he became king, remember, he's representative of people to God and God to people. But he was very loyal to God because every time he did something, he didn't look for excuses. He said, yes, I messed up. See, that's generosity, but also loyalty. I'm able to recognize, yes, I messed up. Sorry. Forgive me. Rather than, oh, she made me do it. Oh, this happened. It was just circumstances. It's just, I was drunk or this. No. I messed up. I'm sorry. Own it. So that was his righteousness. That he knew that he has to be honest with God and loyal to Him.
Even though he committed adultery.
Excuse me?
Several times
Yeah, so...
Not perfect.
Yeah, I hope that was, for how many of you, it was the first time you read Ruth? Yeah, good number of you. Right? Here we go. So see what you were missing? Beautiful book. There's something that to keep on, because Jewish people read Ruth every year at the feast of Shavuot. Sukkot. Sukkot is the time when they for a week have to eat or live outside under the roofs. Okay? Why? Because for the whole week they remember the time in the wilderness. It's 40 years in the wilderness. So what do they remember? They remember that God was hesed to them. God was loyal and faithful to them, took care for them for 40 years. That's what they remember during Sukkot. That's why they read book of Ruth this whole time, to say that, okay, God is faithful to us, God is loyal to us, God was protecting us, we need to be loyal, we need to be respectful, we need to be generous as well. That's why they read that book. So it's good to go back to it every once in a while, just to, like the Jewish people do every year.
But those are the Orthodox Jews, right? Not
All of them. Everybody who celebrates Sukkot, every synagogue will read the book of Ruth.
Every of my friends do that. In the backyard?
Well, I don't know if they don't go to synagogue there, I don't know.
I know that. I know they do a lot of the ceremonies and stuff, but I've never heard of them sleeping outside.
No, well, I don't think they do sleep anywhere, but they have to at least eat a meal outside under this thing. They put a balcony, a little wall, things like that.
We lived in Valhalla, and that was very common. They would build something like a cupboard, open on the sides, covered on top, and they would have their dinners there.
Yeah, that's what they're obliged to do. But for the whole week, they have to do at least that once a day. They have to sit there. Because again, they remind themselves about the tents in the desert, in the wilderness. Yeah. Actually, we went last time that was 2017. we were in Israel, and that was actually during the Feast of Sukkot. So in the western of the Wailing Wall, they had a big sukkah that was only half of the plaza was covered by it, and they were eating. They're sitting. All the daughters were sitting and eating there outside on that place. Pretty cool, actually. Excuse me? It's movable, but it's usually around, I would say, after the harvest, so it would be like October. Yeah, we have to look at it because it changes from year to year, like Ramadan and other things, but it's usually around like September, October. I think, yeah, end of September till the end of October. It moves back and forth. Okay?